Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our first project. We've got 3 objects in here that we're going to be producing, starting off with the goblet or wine glass, and moving on to a bottle that's got a separate label on it with some graphics that we'll create in Photoshop along with the book cover here. So I'm going to go ahead and say new scene under here. Don't save that. And let me get my grid back up here. Okay, so before you start any scene, the first thing you want to do, will come under File, Project Window, and what this is going to do, it's going to create a project. I've got mine currently named here from previous recording, and under here it's going to create all these subdirectories that are important for Maya to locate different information and data that it needs for the scene file. And I can't emphasize how important this is to do every time you start a new scene. It's tempting to just launch the scene file off the desktop or your thumb drive and work from there. You might be used to doing that in Photoshop. If you do that in here, Maya's going to lose track of the information that it needs, and you'll have textures disappearing. This is also important too if you're working on a team project or in a studio environment. Everybody understands the directory structure that Maya creates, and everybody knows where to go to look for certain things, such as the source images directory. This is where we put all the textures and files that we're bringing into Maya, JPEGs or Photoshop files that we're going to bring in and place in our scene. Things that render out are going to go into the images directory. Scene files, once we save our scene here, it's going to go into the scene files directory, and so forth. So working outside of that just creates a kind of a nightmare for everyone. Make sure you start the project window, and I'm going to click new over here. We'll say new project. Let's go ahead and just call this art 255 underscore project underscore 1. And the location that it's going to save it under on my home machine here, so it's under users, my name, documents, Maya projects. And if you're on the school computer, it's going to be under the documents Maya projects folder as well. If you want to change that location and put it out on the desktop and work from there, that's fine. I don't recommend working off of thumb drive or external drive. It tends to kind of slow the process down a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to hit accept, and if I come out here to my directories under documents, Maya, projects, this is the default directory. Here's the previous one I made, so this is the current one that we're going to work in. And if we go ahead and save our scene file, which we can do, it's going to save it into the scenes directory. So I'll come over here and say File, Save Scene As. And you can see right here it's already gone out to that directory, so it knows where to place that scene file. And I'm just going to call this project 1 underscore and put my last name in there. I'd recommend doing that so when you turn your file in, I'll be able to recognize you. And there's 2 ways to save. You can either save it as a Maya ASCII file or a binary. So it defaults on binary. Let's go ahead and just stick with that for now. And hit Save As. Okay, and we'll just go back out to that folder, and there's our save scene file. Okay, so I have some source images that I'm going to bring in, and I'm just going to drag this over here, go out to my desktop, and I've got everything that I need for this project in here. Okay, so I'm just going to grab everything and drag it over here. Alright, go ahead and close that down. Close that out, go back into Maya. And the first thing I want to do, we're going to start on that wine glass or goblet, and you saw in the previous image there that it's rather stylized. We're going to just start off with a standard wine glass. And to get things started, I'm just going to tap on the space bar, go to the 4-panel layout, and under the front panel, hovering over here, I'm going to tap on the space bar again. And we've got our intersection here of 0, 0. We're currently looking just at X and Y. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just drag this down. That's the middle mouse button. So I'm going to bring in an image plane that we're going to use for reference. And I'm going to go under View in the panel here, Image Plane, Import Image. And this automatically takes me out to that source images directory. And I should have a wine glass. I think that's it right there. So this is one that I created for us to follow along with. It's just a pretty standard wine glass. Okay, so I need to place the image so it's first of all on center here. That red line is the center of the wine glass. I want to line that up with the center y-axis here. And we have another line along the bottom here. I want to line that up with the x-axis. So I'm going to go into the attributes editor by hitting Control A. And you'll see I'm in image plane 1. I'm going to just scroll down to the bottom here. So the image center, this is what we want to manipulate right here. We've got x, y, and z coordinates here. So let's line up the center first with the y coordinate. And I can punch numbers in here and move it around like that. Or I can also hold down the Control key and click and drag in here. And you can see it's a little bit more intuitive doing that. And I might have to zoom in here and kind of fine-tune, get that directly on there. I'm just a little off. .940, and then I'm going to line up the red line here along the center, and that's our x coordinate. So holding down the Control key, just click and drag and get that on center. So that's -0.2. And the last thing I want to do, if we come out here to our, I don't have cameras showing in here. Let me turn the cameras on. I think I turned that off. I turned off image plane. Okay, so I've got the image plane on here. So some people like to have this intersecting their model. I don't particularly like that. I like to push it back and get it out of the way so I'm not constantly having to revolve around that. And in the z coordinate here, I'm going to put in -10 and just push it back on the grid 10 units. So I'm going to come over the front panel here and just tap the space bar. And the way we're going to model this, we're going to use a curve and create half of the wine glass, and then we're going to use that curve to revolve around. The center pivot is important, and that's why we needed to line that up along that y-axis. So let's come under our shelf here. The first tab is called Curves and Surfaces, and the third tool over here is called the Curve tool. I'm going to click on that and activate it. And the glass has some thickness to it, so I'm going to start on the inside point. Move in here. So I'm going to click on the center, and I'm using the grid kind of as an indicator of spacing these points apart. I don't want to put a whole bunch of little points together like this and create my curve, because this is just a lot of wasted points here. It's going to create excess geometry that we don't need. So I'm just hitting the delete key to back out of that. So I'm going to just go back a couple more here. I'm going to try to space them out somewhat evenly along using the grid and just following the contour of the inside of the glass. And if I am off a little bit here, we're going to come back and edit these points here. I'm coming up to the rim here, so I want to put a couple extra points, probably about 4 to make that turn there, and then start down the outside of the glass. And I'm kind of lining them up where the other ones are placed on the inside. Okay, so at this curve right here, starting down the stem, I'm going to place 3. Okay, and I'm going to continue down stem here, placing points down to the bottom here. Zoom in. Okay, so I'm just placing a few extra points along that curve right there. And this is a photograph we're working off of, so it's captured some perspective, and we don't want to capture that when we're drawing out from our draft view. So I'm going to kind of compensate for that by sort of imagining what this would look like if we were just seeing it straight on. And then I'm coming across the bottom of the grid here, and instead of just ending on the center here, I'm going to bring this up. There's usually a little indent here on the bottom of wine glasses where they've been made. And to complete the curve, I'm going to hit the Enter key, and it should go green like that. Okay. Okay, so I've got some editing to do. I can see where I'm a little off on some places here and I need to tighten them up. And the way you do that, currently we're in object mode. If you hover over the line and you right mouse click, it's going to bring up a marking menu that's going to allow you to access the different components. To edit those, we're going to access it through the control vertex. And that brings up those points there. They should highlight pink. And what I'm going to do is just drag a marquee around that. I've got a soft select on here. Let me double click here and turn that off. Okay. Alright, so I've got the move tool selected. That's W on the keyboard also, the shortcut. And I'm just going to start dragging these around and placing them a little closer to the actual wine glass. Okay, I've got this one out here a little too far. This point here I could probably drag down. I'm a little off on the curve. Okay, and then the lip up here kind of needs a little help. I'm going to just tighten it up like that. And we're going to be going for kind of a stylized, cartoony look. So I'm going to make this first pass fairly accurate to the photograph of the glass, and then we're going to come back and have some fun with it and modify it and kind of make it our own unique glass. So I'm going to pull this one up here and there. Okay, so I've got a little overlap happening here. These kind of flipped over the wrong direction. So that goes there, here, and there. Okay, these all look pretty good. It's off a little. I'm hitting the Z key to go back to grab that. So Maya remembers every click that you make. That's if I go back here with the Z key, I'll be able to access that again. Okay, and then I'm going to drag a marquee around there. So this one looks like it goes down here. This one goes up here. Okay. Maybe pull that up to there. And just kind of fix this lip right here, or this edge. Okay, so the bottom grid here, I want to make sure that these points are exactly on that grid. So we're going to use the hotkey for snapping to the grid, and that's the X key. So if I hold down the X key and I drag a marquee around this, see I'm toggling it on and off, that's just the move tool. Holding down the X key, the marquee is going to change to that circle, and if I just click, it's going to drag. I can click it over here, so I'm going to snap it to that grid. Same thing here, snapping, as well as this one here. And I want to just snap this one, drag it over here, and then just snap it in Y. So it's sitting along the X-axis right here. Okay, and then these I'm just going to pull down a little here. And I think this could probably come over just a little bit. Alright. Okay, that looks pretty reasonable. Okay, so the 2 points that are along the y-axis here, we want to make sure that those are sitting on the grid as well. And I'm just going to, if I grab this, it's going to want to snap down to the next grid above or below, which I don't want. I just want to snap it along the x-axis. So I'm going to grab only the x manipulator right here and make sure that it's snapped on that center grid. Same thing down here. Holding down the X key and snapping that on there. Okay. So we've got that cleaned up. I'm going to hover over the curve here, right mouse click, and I'm going to go back to object mode. And if we highlight that, it should be green. Okay, let's go ahead and tap the space bar, go back out to our 4-panel view, and then back to our perspective view, and your scene should look something like this. Okay, so we've got half the wine glass. And what we're going to do now is revolve this. It's going to revolve around the y-axis. So under Surfaces, I'm currently in the Modeling menu set. I'm going to come under Create, Revolve, and over here, all these boxes are option boxes. So we want to go ahead and click on that option box. Okay, so I'm going to just come up here and reset the tools, make sure everything's at default. We're going to be outputting geometry as Nurbs. This gives us a nice smooth surface, and we're going to be using the y-axis, as I mentioned before, to revolve around, and it's going to have a start sweep of 0, ending at 360, so it's going to revolve completely around that. Okay, and with the curve selected, hit Revolve, and you should see the glass show up. If yours turn black like this, the surfaces are actually inverted, so they should be gray. Let's come under Surfaces and reverse direction down here at the bottom. That'll flip it around the right way. Okay, and it should look like that. Okay, so you've made your first piece of geometry, and that curve that we made, if we open up our outliner by selecting the 3rd panel layout down here, so the outliner shows everything within our scene. So our image plane here that we brought in of the glass, the curve that we made, and the revolved surface. And I'm going to double click on that and rename it, and we're going to just call it glass. Okay, and with that selected, I'm going to just drag this over to the side with the move tool. Okay, so our curve is still connected to this glass here. And if we wanted to come in and edit those points again, it's going to affect the look of the glass. So if I grab these points here and I decide to kind of bow this out like that, and if I wanted to kind of change the look of this, I could come in here and do that. So I have some flexibility as far as coming in and kind of reshaping things to a certain degree with this curve right here. At a certain point we want to just break that connection, and the way we do that, there's a history connection between those two, and to break that connection we want to highlight both of these. We can highlight them by grabbing them over here. Just click drag down, and under Edit, Delete by Type, History, what this is going to do is just break that connection. Another, the curve is no longer attached to that. So if I go in here and try to edit that, it's not connected to this object. I can come over here and reshape this and do something a little different with it. Kind of tweak it a little bit like this. And if I wanted to revolve another shape around here, I could do that. So the curve can be used over and over again. I can come under here, under Revolve, and let's say we want to output it as polygons this time. I can select polygons. And right now the default is triangles. We usually want to stay away from those and go with quads. Ironically, control points is what creates the quads properly. And if we hit Revolve, we'll see something like this. It's very low polygon right now. That's why you're getting the jagged edge. There is a smooth preview mode that you can go into to take a look at what it will look like once it is smooth. If you hit 3 on the keyboard, you'll see what that looks like smoothed out. Okay, and again, the curve is still connected with that. So if I wanted to change anything here, I could do that. Okay, and again, I'm going to break that connection. I'm going to select the curve over here, and holding down the control key, I'm going to select the revolve surface and edit, delete by type, history, and it's broken that connection now. Okay, so we've got 2 glasses here, and if we hit 1 on the keyboard, it's going to take it back to what it actually looks like. So this very low poly mesh. And if I want to work with this one to smooth it out and actually create additional resolution in here, come under Mesh, Smooth. So that's going to bring up this floating dialog box here with divisions. I can click on that and drag to the right, and that's going to increase it. Just know that if you take it up too high, you can potentially crash Maya. So usually around 2 is where you want to go with something like this. Even just dividing it once would probably be adequate for a prop this small. Okay, and under the channel box, if I scroll down here, this is the input for the poly smooth that we just did, and here's divisions. So I can take it back to 0 here. That's our original geometry, or take it up to 1. And just some of the differences between the polygon and the Nurbs glass. I'm going to hide this curve by just selecting it and hitting Control H. That just hides it. You can see it went to a light gray over here. And visibility is off. You can always type in on or 1. We'll bring it back in 0 for off. Okay, so some of the differences between these two glasses. We have a Nurbs object and a polygon object. And let's go ahead and call this glass poly. And I'm going to just double click on here and put underscore Nurbs. Okay, so the components on these are quite different. Let's just take a look at the components. I'm right mouse clicking over the object. So we have isoparms. That's what these lines are going around here. They're called isoparms. And you can click and drag and add isoparms in here. I'm holding down the Shift key, and we can get a couple of them added in here. There we go. And then under surfaces, we're going to insert isoparms right down here. So that's how you create additional loops around here with the isoparms. So this is increasing the resolution on that. Okay. You can work with the control vertex, which is what we did when we were pulling the points around. Okay. You can work with patches on the surface and pull those around. You can work with hulls. So if I wanted to scale all of this up, I've got this entire hull is selected. If I click on this one and hold the Shift key down, I can grab several hulls and manipulate that. So that goes all the way around, as you can see. Okay, so that's some of the ways that you can manipulate Nurbs with their various components. And over here on the polygon, we've got some different components to work with. So instead of control vertex, we just have vertex. And these vertices, it's plural, are sitting on the surface. I think if you came over here and you notice that they're sitting off the surface, it's just a different algorithm going on here. There's a spline-based algorithm working as opposed to here. You'll see them sitting directly on the surface. Okay. And you can grab those points and pull them out. Okay. You can go to faces and grab individual faces. So these are the polygon faces. These are four-sided polygons called quads. Okay. And you can go to edges. So that's kind of like an isoparm over here. So this is the polygon equivalent. I just double-clicked on that and scale that up and down. Okay, move it up and down as well. So if I push it down like that, it's creating a harder edge, as you can see. All right. And to insert additional edges around here, edge loops, you have to come under the Mesh Tools and go down to Insert Edge Loop. Just click on that. And if I click along the edge that's going in the opposite direction, so if I want one to go vertically, I click on the horizontal edge right here, and I can send it around that way. If I want it to go this way, I can do that. Okay? So that's ways that you would add additional geometry. If I wanted to create a sharp edge right here, I would probably drop in a couple edge loops. These are called tension lines, and I'm hitting Q to get out of that, and I just hit 1 on the keyboard. If I wanted to grab that edge and scale it up, I've now got a harder edge here. I can hold the shift key down and scale like that. So you can see a much harder edge or softer edge. Scale it in. Okay. Also do something like that. So if I want to kind of bulge something out and then drop in a couple edge loops. So if I hit the Y key, that's the same as activating it over here. It's the last tool we used. I can drop in a couple edge loops here, hit Q, and kind of scale that in like that. Okay. Same thing here. This will be a soft edge right here. If I hit 3 on the keyboard, I can see this goes a little soft. If I want to have this be a harder edge, come back out to 1, just activate that and drop in a couple edge loops, creating that tension line. If I hit 3 on the keyboard, come back out. So now we can see there's a much harder edge right there. Okay, so these are some ways to just start manipulating the geometry and creating a look that you like. Okay, and just some of the differences between Nurbs and polygons.